You have probably looked at an empty seat on a flight and never thought about it again. Maybe the plane was not full. Maybe nobody booked it. Maybe someone missed the connection. Maybe it was just random. That is what most people assume, because to a passenger, an empty seat feels simple. It feels ordinary. It feels meaningless. Just another quiet detail inside a long flight, something your eyes notice for a second before your mind moves on. But sometimes, that seat was never meant to be occupied. And sometimes, the reason it stays empty is something passengers were never supposed to notice, because in aviation, some of the quietest things inside the cabin can carry the heaviest meaning. And the strangest part is this: the people sitting closest to that empty seat usually have no idea why no one is allowed to sit there. What passengers assume. Most passengers see an empty seat as nothing: unused space, extra legroom, a lucky row, a better flight than expected. Sometimes people even smile when they see one, because an empty seat can feel like comfort. More room to breathe, more room to sleep, more room to forget you are trapped inside a metal aircraft for hours. But inside aviation, empty does not always mean available, because not every seat on an aircraft is treated the same way. Some seats are assigned, some are blocked, some are protected, and some are deliberately left untouched, for reasons the cabin may understand, but the passengers never hear. That silence is not accidental. It is part of how aviation works, because passengers are usually only shown the version of a flight that feels calm, stable, routine, predictable, even when the truth behind that calm can be something very different. An empty seat can be nothing, or it can quietly mean everything. And from the outside, those two situations can look exactly the same. That is what makes it so easy to miss, because what passengers think they are seeing is often only the surface of what is really happening around them. Not every empty seat is random. Sometimes a seat is kept open for operational reasons: a crew reposition, a medical precaution, a security instruction, a passenger separation issue. Sometimes someone cannot remain where they were originally seated. Sometimes a nervous traveler needs distance. Sometimes a conflict begins quietly before takeoff. Sometimes a crew member notices behavior that feels wrong before anyone else does. And sometimes the reason becomes known only to the crew, because aviation often handles sensitive situations quietly, not to hide them, but to prevent unnecessary fear inside the cabin. Because fear changes people, and at 30,000 feet, fear can spread faster than facts. A single worried look, a whispered conversation, a curtain that stays closed too long. That can be enough to make an entire cabin feel different. So crew members learn to protect the atmosphere, even when they are carrying information passengers never hear, even when they know something is wrong, even when they are watching a situation unfold in silence. Because the job is not only safety, sometimes the job is keeping people calm enough to never realize how close they were to something serious. And sometimes that calm is created by something as small as one empty seat that no one is allowed to touch. When the seat means more. And sometimes, an empty seat means something passengers would never expect. Because there are moments in aviation when a seat beside you is left empty, not for comfort, but because something happened earlier in the flight, something the cabin handled quietly, something that changed the atmosphere for the crew, while the passengers kept watching movies, ordering coffee, falling asleep, and believing it was just another normal journey. That is the part people never think about, because most passengers believe they would notice if something serious happened nearby. But often, they do not. Because cabin crew are trained to make the abnormal feel invisible, to keep voices low, to move carefully, to control emotion, to protect the cabin from fear, even when their own adrenaline is rising, even when they already know the flight has changed. Sometimes the only visible sign is the seat no one returns to, a tray table left untouched, a blanket folded back, a seatbelt lying still, a row that suddenly feels different. even when no one can explain why. And for the crew, that empty space can feel much louder than the rest of the cabin. Because while everyone else sees nothing, they know exactly what that silence means. And sometimes, that silence stays with them. Long after the aircraft lands. The silent understanding. Cabin crew are trained to notice what passengers ignore. A seat number, a missing passenger, a last-minute change, a blocked row, a silent instruction from the cockpit, a look exchanged without words, a pause that lasts slightly too long, because sometimes the most important thing in the cabin is not the passenger making noise. It is the space no one is talking about, the row people stop looking at, the seat no one touches, the place that suddenly feels separate from the rest of the aircraft. Passengers often believe they see everything around them, but they usually see only what the cabin allows them to see. That is part of the job, not deception. Control. Because when hundreds of people are sharing one confined space in the sky, emotion has to be managed carefully. And sometimes that means protecting passengers from a truth they would not know how to process at altitude. Because some moments feel very different when there is nowhere to leave, nowhere to walk, nowhere to escape. Just one cabin, one crew, and one silent understanding that something has changed, even if nobody says it out loud. The system of silence. Passengers usually never hear the real reason, because in aviation, not every truth belongs in the public cabin. Some information stays with the cockpit, some stays with the purser, some stays inside official reports, and some stories stay inside the aircraft long after the passengers leave. That silence can feel strange from the outside, because people naturally want answers. People want explanations. People want to understand what happened around them. But inside aviation, not every answer is spoken. Sometimes silence protects privacy. Sometimes silence protects safety. Sometimes silence protects everyone else on board from fear they do not need to carry. And sometimes the quiet exists for a different reason, because some stories are too heavy to explain in the middle of a flight, too sensitive, too human, too difficult. So the cabin continues. The lights stay dim. The drinks continue. The announcements sound normal. And the aircraft keeps moving through the dark, as if nothing happened at all. That can be unsettling to understand, because it means some passengers may sit for hours beside a story they were never meant to know. The empty seat. So the next time you see an empty seat beside you, you may still assume it means nothing. And most of the time, you would be right. Most empty seats are exactly what they appear to be. A missed connection, a standby change, a simple coincidence, nothing more. But sometimes, the quietest place on the aircraft is the one holding the story no one wants explained. The seat no one mentions. The row the crew keeps checking. The space that somehow feels colder than the rest of the cabin. And once you understand that, you stop seeing an empty seat as empty. Because sometimes, what looks like nothing at all can be the only sign that something happened, that no one on board was ever supposed to notice. Welcome to Cabin Confidential. Subscribe, because the most important stories in aviation are the ones you were never meant to hear.